My name's Amy Bennett, and I'm the Director of Congressional Liaisons and Lobby Days, and Brett is with us too, Brett Cease, and he is the Volunteer Education and Engagement Coordinator. Brett?
Yeah, thanks so much, Amy. I'll just start by saying that if you haven't yet, this is a two-part training. The first part is really keying in on the informational session, so we encourage you to check that out whenever you have the chance to go to our main website and then search in the upper left if you're having a hard time finding it for the informational session. The short link to also being linked there, I've just put in the chat. It's just cclusa.org/intro. And in that session, we covered three things. So we really focused on the foundation of CCL, so our history, how we work to create political will, and how our fundamental perspective is that politicians respond to political will rather than creating it themselves, as well as a brief introduction to the legislation we're supporting. And we'll do much more of that today, but the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, a key element towards addressing climate change that meets the scale of the climate problem in the time frame we need it to. In this lesson today, what we're going to cover is the following six-fold goal. First, we're going to talk about our organization structure and our values. We'll then key in on how citizens in CCL specifically create political will and the tools they use to generate it. We'll focus on our methodology as well as our lobby training, and then really key into our signature policy. All right, with that overview, let's get started, and I'll pass it back to you, Amy, to share more about our six core values.
Great. We also we often talk about the CCL way of doing things, but what are CCL's values? Citizens Climate Lobby is really growing quickly, so it's key that all of our thousands of supporters are on the same page. Our values are something that guide us. We use to guide our decisions, how we respond to others. It's kind of like a home base that we return to. CCL recognizes six core values that are essential to our identity, and that is integrity, focus, optimism, relationships, personal power, and being nonpartisan. So let's explore each of those briefly.
Yeah, so let's start with focus. Our focus is on the first step to an impactful solution that matches the scale of the challenges we face with climate change, a national carbon fee. We know it will not solve the problem entirely and appreciate the work that our friends and other groups are doing as well.
Optimism. We believe that people are good and that democracy works. We're confident that our approach will work because we see progress. We stand for a solution, not in protest of other solutions. We're a community that offers one another comfort, support, and fun as we work.
Relationships. We take the most generous approach to other people as possible, that of appreciation, gratitude, and respect. We listen, we work to find common values, and we endeavor to understand our own biases. We know there's a place for protests, but our approach is to build consensus.
Integrity. We're prepared and we do our research. We're always on time for meetings. Our approach is thoughtful and thorough. We consult experts and we use data. We're open to new information. In fact, we solicit opposing opinions.
This one's my favorite. Personal power. We use our voices to be heard, and in this simple act, it transforms us from spectators to engaged citizens. It also reveals the true nature of democracy to us. We're volunteer-driven, trusting volunteers to make important decisions and create and develop things that will be valued by Citizens Climate Lobby.
Being nonpartisan. We're open to all who are serious about solving climate change. You're welcome no matter where you live, what you wear, what you do for a living, or who you voted for in the last election. We work with elected officials and community leaders from across the political spectrum. We believe everyone is a potential ally. And now that we've discussed our values, Brett's going to tell us a little about CCL structures and our regions within the United States.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amy. So let's get started by reviewing how CCL is organized. Citizens Climate Lobby is a volunteer-driven organization organized locally by chapters. Just as an aside, you might hear us use the terms group or chapter interchangeably. They really mean the same thing. A group or a chapter is a local team that's creating political will and clear evidence that citizens support climate action on climate change within a congressional district or a larger state. CCL has hundreds of groups across North America, from cities like New York City, Los Angeles, and Toronto to Pocatello, Idaho, and Hattiesburg, Mississippi. We also have chapters across Europe, Australia, Africa, Asia, and Central America. Each chapter has a group leader or a couple of leads who help organize and coordinate the local activities of that group. Groups can be in varying stages of development. One group, for example, might just have one person who's just getting up and started. And there are many more established groups that have dozens of members that meet every month. If you're new to CCL and haven't hooked up with your local chapter yet, then you'll want to do so as soon as possible. That's part of what today's webinar is for, so let's review exactly how to do just that. To help you, we have organized the United States and all groups within it within 10 different regions featured here on the map. Each region has a specific regional coordinator who supports the group leaders in that geographic area. To find your local chapter and the group leader closest to you, go to the main website of CCL and look for chapters under the About tab. I've also just put that in the chat window, and we encourage you as new volunteers to seek out your group leader's contact information and to call to introduce yourself, to get involved. You should also be able to find this information from the email that our membership coordinator, Sarah Wanis, has sent you when you first joined CCL. The other thing just to mention is that if you've reached out to your local group leader and you haven't heard back, let us know. Both Amy and I's emails are provided here on the slide. I'll put them in the chat window as well briefly. And we all know sometimes emails go to spam. We can help make that introduction in that case. And again, if no organized group even exists in your area yet, know that that was the condition for any group beforehand as well. Contact us via our emails and we'll help you put in touch with the folks closest to you. I'll pass it back to you, Amy, to discuss more about our groups and group leaders' liaison role, one of the most important roles in our organization.
Thanks, Brett. A CCL liaison is someone who's the representative for CCL when a group contacts their congressional office. And since there's 535 members of Congress, CCL's goal is to have one personal liaison for each of those offices and their staff. The liaisons build an ongoing relationship with their member of Congress and their staff by having regular personal contact and coordinating the group's meetings and communications with that office. And that can be anything from sending a card when your member experiences a significant event, updating the office with timely resources about climate change, or even inviting the staff to a local barbecue. So since we're working on a complex issue, having one consistent point of contact with the office helps make things go much smoother and much more effective. The liaison is the representative for the CCL chapter, and the liaison has a goal of moving that member up the ladder of support for supporting carbon fee and dividend, or as we're going to talk about today, the Energy Innovation Act. So there's an important point of clarification I want to say here. Even though we have liaisons, each CCL volunteer is encouraged to personally write or call their member of Congress and to do so frequently. Brett?
Yeah, and one last important point on that, just with confidentiality that Amy's talking about, is the importance of really training ourselves to have the confidentiality we expect from all volunteers. It's essential that we don't repeat outside or share via notes or emails what we're actually hearing in our meetings. We leave it to the member of Congress or their staff, even if they're vocally enthusiastic, to make their own public statement about climate. The bottom line behind this really is whether it's a seemingly casual conversation about policy details or any other private comments that we've heard, it's really critical that we train and hold ourselves to respect what's said in confidence. When we've consistently demonstrated that with offices that we can be trusted in this way, it's opened the door for us for deeper conversations that have really helped move our members forward. I'll pass it back to you, Amy.
Great. Connected to building those relationships of trust, let's explore the concept of looking for common ground. When we look for common ground, we start in three places. We look for shared values, social connections, and places we care about. Regarding shared values, it can start at the most simple level. If you have kids, consider that most members of Congress have kids and are concerned for their future as well. So during meeting introductions, mention your kids or your grandkids. And Brett?
Yeah, I think other examples for me at least that come to mind of shared values include anything from one's religious beliefs or a concern for a safe and prosperous future, prioritizing energy independence, freedom of choice. Wherever you find values that you share, make sure to keep emphasizing that connection back throughout your interactions. One example for us of these shared values in action could be what one CCL Texas chapter heard from their GOP member about building a relationship that moved them from resistance to interest over many years. That member eventually told them that he had found confidence that the U.S. should continue to lead in emissions reductions by seeking cleaner air through American technology and innovation without sacrificing jobs. And that he agreed that all efforts to reduce emissions should work hand in hand with our economic well-being. Great, there's a lot you can build off right from there. On social connections, we learn about the people we meet with in advance. For members of Congress, we find out about past jobs, schools, interests, boards they serve on. You can do the same thing with aides on LinkedIn. And you can also just ask them in the meeting to talk about themselves. This isn't just being polite. These are things that we actively want to seek out and really want to know. If there's a hometown or college connection, we want to make sure to make that back home. And it gets them talking about themselves instead of feeling lectured to the whole meeting. Now, lastly, as Amy mentioned, common ground can also literally be a patch of ground on this earth, a place that we love, or that the member of Congress or staffer treasures. No matter who we talk to, we've found that people love their home community as well as this larger world passionately. And so in a little bit, we're actually going to jump into our first exercise today to get us all started about thinking about how we can use our own stories as a basis for building that common ground. But first, I'll pass it back to you, Amy, to share a specific example that highlights how one local CCL group began a relationship with their congressman, putting that framework we just discussed into action.
Yes, well, when Mary Ann started as a CCL Congressional Liaison on her first month, she had a conservative member of Congress, and she wanted to show her appreciation with some home-baked goodies for the staff in the local district office. So she learned actually that home-baked goods were allowed to bring in as a gift as opposed to any other more expensive purchased items. And she flipped through her favorite recipe files and found the perfect oatmeal cookies. She chose a slow midweek day to stop in with the warm from the oven cookies. And knowing that she couldn't expect a sit-down appointment with the staff, she was actually really prepared to just deliver the cookies, introduce herself, and leave. But as it turned out, she was right. It was a slow day, and she was able to chat with the key staffers, introduce herself as the new point person for CCL, and then she learned about their preferred way for setting appointments with staff, their preferred meeting schedule with outside organizations, which they suggested as quarterly. She got to know a little bit about them, and they got to know a little bit about her. And it just reminds us that breaking bread together or a small kindness can be the beginning of a more substantial relationship. Mary Ann and her chapter members went on to work with the office regularly and move them up the ladder of support for solutions to climate change. Brett?
And it really is the value of appreciation. Yeah, thank you, Amy. We use it to begin our meetings like we've emphasized, or even our letters to the editor, but it's not just a kickoff device. It's important to work to keep appreciation in our mind throughout our interactions because some people, believe it or not, have a predisposed view of us, like we might of them. So asking ourselves to appreciate them not only changes their view of us, but also takes that chip off of our shoulder on who we think that they are. It also helps us to remove our own biases and to see them as someone that we want to work with rather than as only an obstacle. As Mary Ann's example highlights, this approach puts us in a generous place that allows us to seek understanding and common ground. And since then, Mary Ann's members even joined the Climate Solutions Caucus, which we'll talk more about shortly. So if you take one thing away from today's webinar, it's this. Our one rule is to treat everyone, even those who disagree with us, with respect, appreciation, and gratitude. I'll pass it back to you, Amy.
So to tie this first section all together, let's do an exercise about finding common ground and developing your own story. Here's a quote by E.B. White, the author of Charlotte's Web and Elements of Style. And he gave this in an interview with the New York Times in 1969. He said, Every morning, I wake up torn between a desire to save the world and an inclination to savor it. This makes it hard to plan the day. But if we forget to savor the world, what possible reason do we have for saving it? In a way, the savoring must come first. Let me repeat that last part. If we forget to savor the world, what possible reason do we have for saving it? So in the exercise that we're going to be doing in just a minute, we'll ask you to identify a specific place that you love that's threatened to be negatively impacted by climate change. So we're not talking about a generic place like the beach, nor do we mean to focus on a place that's threatened by other environmental factors like overdevelopment or toxic pollution. Let's specifically key into how climate change is and will impact the places we care for. If it's in your hometown or congressional district, that's all the better to establish that common ground. Brett?
Yeah, and just to clarify, the reason that we ask this is that social science research has continually shown people connect much more strongly with their own backyard and concerns for their community than far-off impacts. So, think about what your place looks and sounds like in your own mind's eye. Try to paint a picture for what it is worth using descriptive imagery as you can to help us understand what you savor it. And if possible, tie in the potential impact on local economies that your community faces as well. Anything from reduced worker or agricultural productivity, extreme heat, wildfires, drought, or inland flooding. And connect that back to the common concerns that we have for our natural world and economic well-being. I'll also just say this exercise is a powerful way to begin developing a story that you can share with others. And stories themselves are very powerful means of connecting with others. The more prepared we are to share our own and make that personal connection, the more likely we are to build out from common ground. Stories are also a way to humanize climate change and help make those impacts upfront and personal, as well as help those around us deepen their concern for caretaking and preserving these places for future generations. So I can see we've already got a great series of examples in the chat. Keep those going. You can put them in the chat or the Q&A. And I'll just give you a quick specific example of my own life, and then we'll ask you to think of your own examples to share. So continue to start writing your own. And for me, for the past several years, I've had the privilege of serving as regional coordinator for the Gulf Coast states while living in Dallas, Texas, and the chance to work with some of the most inspiring climate advocates I've ever met. I've gone canoeing and for hikes along the trails just south of the Houston coastline, and it was here last summer that our CCL chapters witnessed the unimaginable deluge of more than 50 inches of record-breaking rain in their communities. Some of them were forced to move and forever lost their homes, treasured possessions like family heirlooms, family photo albums, and dealt with that back-breaking effort of rebuilding more than an unprecedented $100 billion worth of damages. The resolve of our local CCL volunteers in Houston ever since, for me and many others, has been inspirational. They hosted our regional conference only months after hurricane. They gained the support of the mayor of Houston and other local officials on both sides of the aisle in support of the Climate Solutions Caucus and in taking climate action to ensure that our elected officials earnestly work together towards solutions that address the underlying cause behind so much pain, loss, and destruction. And now we'd love to hear your own places and thoughts. Please continue to use that Q&A or chat area if you would like to share the places that you savor in writing. I'll pass it back to you, Amy.
Thanks. So if we say our goal is to create political will, then we should clarify, what does that mean? Think of building political will as actions that our chapters strategically take to demonstrate to Congress that the will of the people is to have a sustainable climate. So what does that look like? Political will is really the clear demonstration of support back home in the district, and legislators need to know what you would like them to do. They would like a specific, actionable step. Not simply that we want a sustainable climate and a strong economy. They want to hear what policies we want enacted so they can act on the people's will. And that's precisely what we're going to get to in just a moment. But first, a little bit more on why we use the methodology we do. Brett?
Yeah, just simply put, we organize people by congressional districts because it's the most effective way we've found to be efficient to meet with and demonstrate political will to Congress. And through our decade of organizing, we've learned from many others about what creates political will and what doesn't. And here's why that's important. We only want to ask you as CCL volunteers to do things that we know will have a very good chance of demonstrating the will of the people. We take actions that we know will be successful in having members of Congress move in the direction of our legislation.
So what creates political will? We've organized our actions into 5 levers, and we call them the levers of political will. There's lobbying, media relations, grassroots outreach, grass tops outreach, and chapter development. And we'll review each in depth next. First, there's lobbying. Nothing's more impactful than citizens meeting frequently with their member of Congress or their staff. So we meet with them often in order to build a relationship of trust and show them that this legislation is something their constituents want, and to educate them on how the proposal will impact their state or their district. To create political will through lobbying, you can get involved by becoming a liaison or a co-liaison for your district or state. You can learn effective communication skills and listening skills with CCL's Learning Center. And you can attend a meeting with your member of Congress either in Washington or in your local district. Lobbying is the most highly leveraged activity we do. The second lever of political will is media. We work with both print and digital media in order to drive the conversation towards carbon fee and dividend. Creating political will through media might include becoming the point person for a local newspaper to watch for opportunities for writing letters to the editor. Or you could write letters to the editor or op-eds of your own. You could spread stories and coverage across social media. And you could also get to know your editorial board and the key reporters at your local or state newspaper. And now Brett's going to take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. That third lever that creates political will is really focused on the grassroots outreach. So you can think of this really as recruitment and education. We recruit and educate the public on climate solutions, on citizen advocacy, and on how to participate in one's government. Some opportunities within grassroots outreach include anything from tabling, which is really just attending a public fair or a farmer's market-like event to represent CCL and hand out flyers and information at local events, as well as generating letters to Congress at those events. We also train people to become public speakers or to help them seek out speaking engagements for another CCL presenter in their chapter. And we'd also like to just put a quick word in about our action teams. These are teams organized by volunteers around specific topics like energy or ocean impacts, agriculture, higher education, and they work and strategize on ways to move that specific sector or area towards supporting our legislation. Now, most action teams usually meet monthly by phone and are doing some of our most important work. They're always looking for new volunteers to help make a difference, and especially if you're coming into CCL with a wealth of experience from a particular sector that you'd like to share, I'm going to encourage you to check them out. I just put a link in the chat window to our action team directory in community. You can let us know if you have questions too. That fourth lever of political will is that of grass tops outreach. Now, grass tops, really, if you think of grassroots as the base, are the community leaders in your local community. And what you can do with them is really work on both a local as well as coordinated national level to identify key experts and leaders in your community, seek out their endorsement as a way of influencing your own member of Congress, and also educate them. Even if they're not ready yet to publicly support our policy, how can they find concern about climate impacts back home, as well as how to move their own community forward on climate solutions? Lastly, that last lever of building political will is developing your own chapter. And I think this perhaps is the most overlooked actions that we do, but also the most critical, because developing your chapter at the grassroots level in terms of both numbers and skills is what allows us to lobby more effectively, to generate more media, to do more outreach. And so some ways that you could help out here include organizing monthly meetings, helping your chapter's communication with invitations to those meetings or action team get-togethers via phone calls, emails, social media, you name it. And also just looking around your chapter, inviting new people to attend. Who's not showing up? How can your group locally diversify to represent your larger community more effectively? The bottom line is really this. We've just gone through 5 different levers with a lot of actions to help you on a full menu of options available. But we would love to have you key in on 1 or 2 that you're already most comfortable. At first, we encourage you to do the things that you feel that you already have confidence in. And then, as you get more interest or experience, we encourage you to push yourself into doing things that are outside of that comfort zone. I'll pass it back to you, Amy.
Great. So here on the screen are the levers in review. But there may be times when you feel that a lever seems stuck. For example, you've met with your member of Congress several times. They agree that carbon fee and dividend is the best proposal. However, they don't want to support it until there's more support from primary voters or businesses in the district. So in that example, to demonstrate the support to members of Congress, it makes sense to ramp up outreach to businesses and community leaders, and also to grow your local group or chapter to broaden your vocal base of support. Brett?
Yeah, I think at this point it's important just to step back for a little bit and think about the historical larger examples and movements that have come before us. Because what we're trying to do together is not going to be easy. We realize that. But we also have full confidence that citizens who are passionate, who are well-trained, who are organized by congressional district, and who have a great system of support can more than influence the political process. And for me, what sets Citizens Climate Lobby apart from other organizations is this. We are working on building ongoing positive relationships with our community and with our members of Congress in order to create the political space that allows these members to move in the direction we need them to. So, when we talk about building a relationship, what does that look like? Well, let's give you an example from the story of Mahatma Gandhi and General Jan Smuts. You might know the story of how Mahatma Gandhi's efforts to convince the British to end their colonial rule of India took place. But before that time, Gandhi actually cut his teeth fighting for the rights of Indians in South Africa. And this brought him straight into contact with the head of the Transvaal government, General Jan Smuts. So the story goes that when they met, Gandhi quietly walked in and told the general the following. Here's the story. He said, "I've come to tell you that I'm here to fight against your government." And laughing, the towering Smuts sneered down and responded by asking, "Oh, really? And do you have anything else to tell me?" To which Gandhi, without missing a beat, said, "Yes, I intend to prevail." Smuts was astonished and asked, "And how do you intend to do that?" And Gandhi's reply was simple, "With your help. With your help." Years later, Smuts admitted in his own diary that this is exactly what happened. He wrote this, "Gandhi appealed to what was best and most noble in me." He continued, "Gandhi never forgot the human background of the situation we faced, never lost his temper or succumbed to hate, and preserved his gentle humor in even the most trying of situations." Now, I have to admit, when I first heard this story, I thought it was a little bit far-fetched. How could I expect myself to accomplish what Gandhi did, or any of us, right? But this is just what is at the heart of CCL's methodology. 5 years ago, people told us there was no way that we could get Republicans to sponsor a resolution in Congress that said that climate change is real, significantly influenced by humans, and that Congress should do something about it. We chose to see that possibility and worked with Representative Gibson to introduce the Republican Climate Resolution. 3 years ago, people told us there was no way that we could get Republicans and Democrats to sit down together, much less form a caucus and join together with the word climate in its title. We chose to see that possibility and worked with Republican Representative Curbelo and Democrat Representative Deutsch to create the first Climate Solutions Caucus, which today has 90 members, 45 Republicans, and 45 Democrats working together to talk solutions and address the most pressing issue of our time. Even earlier this year, people told us it was impossible to believe that Republicans and Democrats would be willing to co-sponsor and introduce significant climate legislation together, as it hasn't happened in over a decade. We chose to see that possibility, and today the monumental Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act is a direct result of the 10 years of CCL volunteer efforts working with all members of Congress. Gandhi sought to build a relationship with General Smuts, and in turn, this approach led to substantial results. By using our own techniques of building on that genuine respect and appreciation to see the best in the other person, finding common ground and building relationships, we can too lead to the change we need in our policy and government. And as we work to build relationships with people, we are empowered in that process. This is because it connects us on a personal level with whomever we're communicating. Again, whether it's a face-to-face meeting, in a written letter to the editor, or with our neighbors in the larger community. I'll pass it back to you, Amy.
Thanks. Well, let's step back to put this all together and to connect how Gandhi's example ties in with CCL's methodology of looking for the best in others, being for something, and finding common ground. How does this help us build relationships? And there's a powerful case study example in building relationships with members of Congress that's led to political will that's been profiled in the national media, including a piece in the New York Times last summer. Here's a picture of Jay Butera. Jay's worked to address climate change for more than a decade, and he's been a volunteer with Citizens Climate Lobby since 2012. And now he's on our board of directors. In 2013, he met Representative Deutsch, a Florida Democrat whose district was already experiencing the effects of global warming. Jay mentioned that he had a vision to create a bipartisan caucus in the House that would focus on climate solutions. Deutsch liked the idea and agreed to work with him and the Citizens Climate Lobby towards that goal. Jay started visiting offices on Capitol Hill as an effort to get Republicans and Democrats to sit together and devised a 2-by-2 approach. Jay reasoned that the first movers were likely to be from Florida. The coastal districts are mainly Republican, and the coastline is threatened existentially by climate impacts, he said. Jay went to Miami. He attended events in southern Florida that focused on climate change. And there he met locals and helped them start a local Citizens Climate Lobby chapter. Jay said, I saw that local mayors and county leaders were dealing with the impacts of climate change head on. Some towns had raised the roads and moved wells miles inland to escape seawater intrusion, and in other places, seawater poured into the streets at every high tide. Jay discovered that Congress members in Washington were disconnected with the reality on the ground.
Yeah, and so for the next 2 years, what Jay, along with many other volunteers, did to work to address that disconnect was reach out to local elected officials, mayors, county commissioners, presidents of chambers of commerce, state legislators, and university presidents, over 50 of them throughout South Florida, and many of them within Republican-held congressional districts, and he asked them to specifically sign a letter asking Congress to address climate change. It made a difference. One of the first Republicans to step forward was Representative Carlos Curbelo, and in February 2016, he, along with Representative Deutsch, formed as co-chairs the first ever Bipartisan Climate Solutions Caucus, which is continuing to explore policy options that address the impacts, causes, and challenges of our changing climate. I'll pass it back to you, Amy.
So today, the caucus, as Brett had mentioned, has 90 members, 45 from each party, and it continues to serve as an organization to educate members on economically viable options to reduce climate risk. And CCL has played an integral role in building up the membership of that caucus. But it works independently and overall does not explicitly endorse the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, though all 5 of the co-sponsors are on it. What Jay and the rest of the Floridians did is a perfect example of how demonstrating respect and appreciation for others, even those who we think oppose us, finding common ground and building relationships leads to political will. They met their Congress members and appealed to the best in them. They created political will locally that allowed those members to respond to it. And now that we've reviewed some case studies, Brett's going to discuss how this connects to our mission.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amy. So Many people are familiar with CCL's statement or a vision to create the political will for a livable world. However, I think there's less awareness about our equally critical purpose organizationally, and that is this: to empower individuals to experience personal breakthroughs when exercising their political power. Now, we know that politicians don't create political will, they respond to it. And that it's our job as citizens to generate so much that they have no other choice than to do what we're asking them for. We also have to ask, if we're not talking with those who disagree with us, then who is? In DC, we know that there are 4 paid energy lobbyists specifically for each member of Congress. In the absence of citizens, Congress only hears from industry and these paid lobbyists. So CCL teaches citizens like you and I on how to empower ourselves, how to develop relationships with our representatives so that we can help Congress see there is political will for significant climate legislation. We endeavor to show people that your voice will make a difference. So what does this really mean to enable individual breakthroughs in the exercise of personal and political power? Well, we've all had experiences in life when we've discovered a newly found source of strength or inner ability to realize that through our active participation in a cause, we could make a difference. And one powerful example of an individual experiencing a breakthrough that really, I think at least, encapsulates that very heart of personal transformation that CCL is seeking is that of Piper's story. That's her on the right-hand side there. Piper is an 18-year-old student who attended the CCL National Conference last year and was so inspired by the empowerment that she experienced, she wrote the following to our executive director, Mark Reynolds. I honestly have no idea where to begin in my gratitude for CCL. Never have I found an organization that gave me such confidence that I can change the world. Before, I viewed Congress as a bickering political dead end, but I was so inspired by these positive interactions between our citizen lobbyists and the staffers that I'm now considering running for office myself someday so that I too can foster more cooperation in politics. At the conference, I was treated as though my age and unique point of view was actually an asset to the organization. Now, for me, Piper's experience of personal empowerment is at the very heart of everything that our organization strives to provide all of our volunteers. And since then, Piper's continued to use her voice for climate advocacy in helping lead the passage of a bipartisan state resolution acknowledging climate impacts in Utah, and even given a TEDx talk on her experiences. I'll pass it back to you, Amy.
Thanks. As one final distinction about what we mean when we say empowerment, I think it's helpful to reflect on the words of Charles Reich in his book, Power and the Law. As a legal scholar who was deeply involved in policymaking for decades, Reich explained that when you reach out to another person through the energy or creativity that's within you and the other person responds, you're exercising power. When you make somebody else do something against their will, to me that's not power at all. That is force, and force to me is a negation of power. I think his words are a helpful window into the importance of why CCL communicates from a different frame. Because this experience of personal breakthroughs with empowerment is the very core of our organization, we'd like to make sure and to take a minute to invite you all to reflect back on your own lives to a time when you've experienced such a breakthrough. It could be a story of when you were empowered by a parent or a role model or a boss or somebody you just happened to meet. Whatever your story might be, we look forward to hearing about how it moved you to realize something new about yourself and how it engaged you in a broader sense of being involved in the world. So please share that in the Q&A section. It could be organizing your local neighborhood to preserve trees, going back to school after having kids, finding your voice after a divorce, or even starting your first business lawn mowing. And I want to give you an example of something that happened with me. When my son was just going to elementary school, we had a road that was going to be broadened in our neighborhood that was going to actually create a lot of traffic. I went to a city council meeting with the PTA president of the local elementary school. We were really concerned that children were going to be hit by cars that were cutting through neighborhoods to avoid the traffic. And when the city council asked, well, what can we do about it? I whispered into Mary's ear, we could put a roadblock on Puebla Street. And Mary just stood right up and said, we could put a roadblock on Puebla Street. And within a few weeks, it was up. So I wish I would have stood up myself, but I didn't. But it did just help me see that there was power. I had power. So by reminding ourselves of the times we've had breakthroughs in personal power and stepped a little bit outside of our comfort zone, we remember that real and profound personal change is possible, and grounding ourselves in many transformative opportunities to have more breakthroughs, you'll have those opportunities with CCL. So Brett, how about if you take it from here?
Yeah, let's actually transition to talking about our laser talks. So we are at the final third of the webinar, and then we'll again be open for Q&A. So continue to put great questions in the Q&A box and share your own experiences of empowerment in either the chat or the Q&A. But let's talk about how we put this all into practice with our advocacy resources that are really at the heart of how we become more effective communicators in our climate advocacy. And that's with something that we like to call laser talks. Each talk is brief, it focuses on one particular aspect of our issue, and we take putting the time into practicing it very seriously. CCL has dozens of these laser talks available on our website, and I'll put the link in the chat window here, but you can find them if you scroll down to the very bottom of our homepage. You can see them here in the slides as well. On the green banner at the bottom, there's a specific page that says laser talks. And then from there, you can click on Laser Talks and see the whole host of ones available. You can find ones on anything from energy policy to economics, and really language that's meant to be small and easy to understand. We take time as an organization to practice one of these new talks, both alone and as well as in our groups each month, to continue to hone our own craft. And this really helps in writing letters to the editor, as well as op-eds, and talking with political leaders, as well as even your next conversation with Uncle Vernon, who might be skeptical. Through intentional practice, you'll feel and you'll find that you also are more comfortable and conversant if somebody asks you about a wide range of issues that might relate to global warming, like China or the overall economic impact on jobs. So let's practice one of the most common and the newest updated laser talk that we have. For example, here's our laser talk, and again, I'll put it in the chat window, on the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. So what I'm going to do is demonstrate reading it out loud with me. Please join me in your own home or coffee shop, wherever you might find yourself. And feel free to embarrass yourself if it's public especially. So the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act of 2018 is the first bipartisan climate legislation introduced in a decade. It's based on a plan developed by CCL to account for the cost of burning fossil fuels. If enacted, the act will drive down America's carbon pollution by over 40% in 12 years and bring climate change under control by means of American technology, innovation, and ingenuity. Climate scientists and prominent economists alike say it represents the best first step to reduce the impact of global warming. A predictably increasing carbon price will stimulate innovation and intention and invention in the new clean energy economy, while ensuring that every American has the means to weather this transition and participate in putting solutions to work. We know this is a little slimmed down. We'll get into discussing the actual policy details in just a little bit, but for now, start sharing the part of the talk that jumped out at you in particular as you were sharing it, or anything that you in particular have questions about, especially in that Q&A area. I'll thank you all for joining me in saying that laser talk out loud, and I'll just close this section by emphasizing that reading through our laser talks on issues that you have questions about today is probably one of the most useful ways to get a good grasp of the basics in CCL's advocacy, as well as a way that you can share that then with others. I'll pass it back to you, Amy.
Well, this is a great opportunity to promote excuse me, this is a great time to promote that all of what we're about to review is available on Community. The website is simply community www.citizensclimatelobby.org. And to find these materials, go to the Take Action Center, then follow the pathway to Lobby Congress. Now, even though no two congressional meetings are the same, the basic outline follows a general form. So if we're going to meet with Congress prior to the meeting, first, we do research on your member and the district. We learn what they're really proud of, what they like, what they've accomplished. We research the local impacts of climate change. We learn how carbon fee and dividend will impact their district or state. We review how any previous meeting minutes, so we figure out where they're at already. And we determine ahead of time who will be responsible for the following things: assigning roles such as leader, timekeeper, note taker, asker, leaver, and the person who does follow-up. We meet in teams of 4 to 6 CCL members, and we like to say lobbying is a team sport. We don't do it alone. Our basic meeting outline goes as follows. Thank the member or staffer for meeting with us. The timekeeper asks, how much time do you have for a meeting? We introduce ourselves briefly. If we're meeting with a staffer, then we ask the staffer to tell us a little bit about themselves. We show appreciation for something that they've done recently, something you sincerely appreciate. It doesn't have to be about climate or environment. We explain our purpose to create the political will for a livable world. We briefly state our request to support or introduce legislation that puts a fee on carbon-based fuels and returns the net revenue to American households. And then mention that we have more to say on that, but we'd like to discuss your concerns. Then there's the listening and discussion part of the meeting. Here's some possible questions you could ask to further the discussion, but be flexible based on your relationship. For instance, rather than react to their answer, it's important to help the member or the staffer feel heard. So you might ask, what might be preventing the representatives from supporting our legislation? Or who in our district would we need to convince about the merits of our proposal to win your support? Or what's your preferred plan to lower emissions? And having done your research, you'll probably be able to anticipate what you think their responses might be. Brett?
Yeah, Amy, thanks so much. So let's round it out to the end of that meeting then. As Amy's outlined, I think the transition from the middle to the end is when you've run out of supporting asks that you strategically wanted to find out about. And from there, you can really continue to offer additional materials as well as establish a plan for follow-up, asking how they prefer to stay in touch, the level of frequency, and also how you can continue to work together back home in the district. We also want to make sure to thank them for their time. And really, that's the overview of how we conduct a meeting with a congressional office, especially for that first time. Though we don't have time today, we encourage everyone to seek out this opportunity with their group and to actually practice, put the actual outline into your own role play so that you can feel more comfortable when you actually walk into the halls of Congress for the first time. And we do have these lessons available in the Learning Center on Community, where you can actually see a role play, stop, pause, and walk through your own experience of that. And again, that's available in the Learning Center on Community in a link that I just put in the chat window. I'll also just say how wonderful it is to continue to read all of the examples of people's empowerment experiences. Keep those coming. All of these are so well thought out, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share with each other. We hope that you're getting strength in that experience. So I'll pass it back to you, Amy.
All right, well, we've reached the final and most essential topic. Let's finish up this lesson with a discussion of the policy details of the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. On November 27th of this year, just a few weeks ago, the Energy and Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act was introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives. That is Bill number 7173. The lead sponsors are Democrat Representative Deutsch in Florida and Republican Francis Rooney of Florida. Let's see, who else? We've got Representative Delaney of Maryland and Representative Christ of Florida are co-sponsor, and Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania is a Republican co-sponsor. But let's start with a quick review here. Before we get into that, let's start with a quick review of where we are with climate policy in the U.S. today. The price we consumers pay for fossil fuels is artificially low, in that historically governments have seen economic growth linked with incentivizing their development. So today, this is also due to several factors, including before production, fossil fuel producers receive a discount on leases on public lands and offshore. And during fossil fuel production, producers receive subsidies, special tax breaks, and eminent domain for pipelines. After production, the price we pay for fossil fuels doesn't include some huge hidden costs. So these hidden costs are known as externalities. This is what economists call them. So there's military costs. They've spent trillions protecting energy supply lines across the world. Health costs include coal alone increasing healthcare costs from 300 to 500 billion a year. And of course, there's many increasing environmental costs associated with adapting to and mitigating the effects of a changing climate system. Brett?
Yeah, so if the market price for any product, not just fossil fuels, doesn't include its real costs, economists have a term for that. It's called a market failure. And global warming or climate change has been called by some of the greatest economists the greatest market failure in the history of capitalism. Economists say that the best first step to correcting this market failure is to hold any product accountable for its costs. With fossil fuels, this means moving those hidden costs that Amy just discussed back onto the balance sheet of the producers. The idea of putting a price on carbon then is simple. We add to the cost of doing business to those resources because we want to reveal the hidden costs that currently no one is taking responsibility for. Getting that price right means making the market tell the truth. It transforms our whole economy to move in the right direction, and it means that ordinary citizens like you and I, consumers, small business owners, taxpayers, will all recover the market leverage that we're supposed to have to determine whether we do something that's too costly or not. In Citizens Climate Lobby, we emphasize that with all costs fully accounted for, then we let fossil fuels compete with all other forms of energy in the marketplace, and when consumers realize the true costs of burning them, they will make more informed and better decisions, leading to a clean energy economy. And so let's get into the nitty-gritty details of what the actual Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act looks like. So I like to think of this policy as a four-legged chair. Let's explore each of these policy legs in detail: the carbon fee, the carbon dividend, the carbon border adjustment, and limited regulatory adjustment. First, let's discuss carbon fees. This policy puts a fee on carbon dioxide emissions of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas in proportion to the carbon dioxide output of the fuel. It starts low at $15 per ton of CO2 emitted, and it grows over time, having an additional $10 per ton annually. This will drive down carbon pollution because it encourages energy companies, leading industries, and American consumers to move forward with cleaner and cheaper options relatively. The fee is also applied as upstream as possible for domestic production. So this means the imports or the first point of sale, so the mine, the mouth of the coal mine, the wellhead, and it utilizes existing measuring facilities that are already weighing these products. Even on its own, a carbon fee is very attractive because it's market-based, it's simple, it's predictable, it's transparent, it's economy-wide, and it's difficult to gain. It provides predictability for businesses to allocate their capital efficiently so that it can thrive in a low-carbon economy. In short, we provide a simple price signal on carbon emissions and let the market do the rest. Now, what I've described, though, is similar to a carbon tax. And on their own, carbon taxes have been controversial for two main reasons. One of which is that they raise revenue for government. And the second is that they are regressive, hurting low and middle income families particularly. So let's discuss how both of these concerns are addressed with the second leg of the policy, the carbon dividend. Let's discuss that here for advancing the slide. Thank you. All right, so The money collected for the carbon fee is allocated in equal shares every month to the American people to spend as they see fit. Program administrative costs are paid from the fees that are collected. The government does not keep any of the money from the carbon fee. Under this plan, about 2/3 of all households would break even or come out ahead considering higher costs of living. The dividend, therefore, addresses both of those chief concerns. First, it ensures that the government doesn't grow. And secondly, it protects low and middle income households from higher prices. This protection is key because CCL has its roots in social justice concerns from our founders, Marshall Saunders' decades of work with microcredit loans, as well as early on when he and other leaders brainstormed what was the most effective first step in addressing our climate concerns. We were acutely aware of the need to protect lower income families from any temporary rise in energy costs that such a transition could create. That third element of the border carbon adjustment, you can think of it as this. To protect US manufacturers and jobs, imported goods are going to have to pay a border carbon adjustment, and goods exported from the US will receive a refund under this policy if they're going to or coming from countries without an equivalently strong price on carbon. This adjustment would both discourage businesses from relocating to where they can emit more carbon dioxide, as well as encourage other nations to adopt an equivalent price on carbon. This approach rewards producers, consumers, and other nations if they emit fewer greenhouse gases, which, if we remember from earlier in the presentation, is the whole goal. So CCL's legal trade law team also assures us that these are both make this compliant with the WTO international arrangements. Now lastly, and then we'll just have a quick review and then get to questions. I know that we're almost to the top of the hour here. Let's discuss what it means when we say limited regulatory adjustment. What this means policy-wise is that additional regulations on covered carbon dioxide emissions, as long as emission targets are being met, are prevented. Regulations, however, based on other pollutants like NOx or SOx, ozone, particulates, mercury, any of these will not be affected, nor will regulations such as the CAFE auto mileage standards, Greenhouse Gas Authority over non-road vehicles or aircraft, the methane abatement program, water quality, any of these will not be touched. This is a very focused regulatory adjustment. All of those will remain open, as well as the ability for frontline communities to regulate greenhouse gases for their impacts on health. And since the Clean Power Plan itself said that carbon prices will achieve by our year 3 of that price going up, this policy is better than what those emissions would have achieved should it be implemented. At this point, I'll pass it back to you, Amy, for a quick summary and put a link to some of the questions that people are asking about for more information in the chat.
Thanks, Brett. So in summary, the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act legislation is incredibly close to what CCL has been advocating for. Our two biggest concerns that take this serious chunk, we want to take a serious chunk out of emissions, and that we want to ensure long-term support by taking care of the poor and also, and by taking care of the poor. And it's almost exactly the way we've always been wanting it to be addressed. So it allows the Main Street economy to keep chugging along and even expand, while sending a direct price signal to investors that the smart path for future investment is moving towards a low carbon energy sources, allowing even the energy sector to transition investments cost effectively. So it's gradual. We'll see economic gain and not harm. Now, this is a huge win for the climate. The goals, the targets, the forcing mechanisms in this policy are more aggressive than anything we've seen submitted in Congress. This is a new day for the climate and for the world. So as a result of years of hard work, this is a clear signal to every nation on earth that there are legislators in the United States on both sides of the aisle who want to see this happen, and they want to see it happen fast. So that's a message of hope. Pretty exciting. So, As we review next steps, we're going to open up a brief poll to gain everybody's feedback on what components of this training you found most or least helpful in order for us to tailor it to future meetings. If you're logged in on your computer, you'll see a series of prompts that show up on your screen, and we really would just like your honest and anonymous input. If you're calling in, this is only a computer-based feature, so we appreciate you taking your time to review those next steps and share your thoughts. So, okay, on to next steps. Have you joined CCL Community, our sister website? If not, you can register for a login and a password at community.citizensclimatelobby.org. And Sarah at our headquarters will send you a login and a password within a few days. A lot of it is open to the public without any login, but you'll want to get that. Check with the group nearest you. If you haven't done that yet, Sarah, again, is going to contact you. The email will come from membership@citizensclimatelobby.org. And Sarah can help you find your group or the group leader's email address. And we suggest you email the group leader and attend their very next meeting, which I believe is this Saturday, Brett. And if there's no group near you, Sarah's going to provide you with a state or regional coordinator's email address. Shoot them an email and find so that the two of you can talk. If you don't hear back from Sarah or a group leader, contact Brett or I, since things just go to spam sometimes. And my email is Amy, A-M-Y, @citizensclimate.org, and Brett's is B-R-E-T-T @citizensclimate.org. We'll hope to see you again soon, and maybe think about coming to our next conference in Washington, where lots of other staff, including Brett and I. Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.